What's up, guys? My name is Andrea, and welcome to the Decompression Chamber. At the end of April, I went home to Twin Falls, Idaho to visit my folks, as well as my siblings. During that time, I got to sit down with my father, Greg Bryant. He was a captain in the Army, and he shared his experience during his time of service during the Vietnam War. He never went to Vietnam, but again, during the Vietnam War, he was subject to the draft, so he decided to just join, get it out of the way. But he gives a little bit of insight as well, the lead up to it, what his upbringing was like in rural 50s Minnesota. And without further ado, my interview with my father, Greg Bryant. My guest is my dad, Greg Bryant, and he's going to tell me a little bit about growing up in Minnesota with my uncles and going into the Army and serving during the Vietnam, luckily not in Vietnam, and a little bit ex post facto. So, uh, where were you born?
Okay, well, I was born in Minneapolis, but didn't really remember living there because we moved to a town called Maple Plain when I was 2 years old. And that's where I grew up at, went to school, graduated from high school, everything else right there in Maple Plain. And it was a small town at that time of like 650 or 700 people, not much, so you kind of knew everybody in town.
Yeah.
Grew up with two brothers, and the whole neighborhood was, everybody had kids. I mean, it was just, you could get a baseball game going whenever you want, or whatever you wanted to do. Even in the winter, we had a skating rink there. We'd play hockey or whatever. I mean, it was fun for kids. You could go out. None of the moms had to worry about where you're at, what time you came home.
Sure.
You know, you were just left in the morning. If you showed up at lunchtime, fine. If you didn't, nobody worried about it.
Right.
Be home for supper or you weren't going to eat, and there you go. And so, I mean, it was a great time to grow up, and I always tell people I'm glad I grew up when I did and where I did, because there wasn't all the influences of the, the drugs and all the rest of this stuff that's going on this day and age. I mean, we could get in trouble in high school drinking beer or whatever else, but nobody ever got in serious trouble or accidents or anything like that. So.
What about train derailments?
Oh, yeah, well, that was, yeah, so that was a couple of kids that we went to school with, a couple of brothers, the Stuckmeyer boys, and they lived right by the railroad track coming through town. And one time at the edge of town, there was an old dump down there, and they came up with a bright idea. Well, let's go down to the dump and get some old car wheels that are probably down there, and they got a bunch of car wheels and put them on the railroad track, and they derailed the train. Luckily, I wasn't involved with that. That was there, but I was at school. I was in maybe second grade.
Wow.
And
what were they?
Danny was in. I forget if he was in my. I think he was a year ahead of me. He was in third grade.
Wow.
But all at once we saw these people walking down there the hallway, and then see him walking. I turned on, it was the FBI.
They had no idea how to solve it since they hadn't actually derailed the train.
Yeah, but it was a pretty big deal, and but anyway, good clean fun.
Yeah, just the type of fun you get into now.
Yeah.
Your dad, my grandpa, had been in the Navy, not during your lifetime,
right,
though, right?
Right. Yeah,
so,
he was in right at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, my great uncle, so your uncle on your mom's side was a Marine, but he was only like a couple years older than you. So, I mean, that would have been right about the time you were thinking I might have to join, right?
Yeah, well, no, Gary, our uncle, he was only like 3 years older than I was, but he joined the Marine Corps in 1965. As soon as he got out of high school, he joined the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And so he got out about the time I was going into the Army.
Okay.
And he did a tour in Vietnam and whatnot. He was a aircraft hydraulic mechanic, I think it was, with that. But and then my brother Steve, he went into the Navy briefly, but then his wife was pregnant and have a kid, and for whatever reason he applied for a early out after like 6 or 8 months, and they let him out.
Wow.
So he wasn't disappointed at all.
Yeah,
and
who would be?
Yeah, and then my younger brother Bruce, he never went in. He was smart.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, for you, perfect timing, because you turned 18 in 1968 when things are really
Yeah,
heating up in earnest. So
yeah. I
you're
mean,
thinking,
I went into the army in St. Patrick's Day in 1969.
wow,
Yep. And so, again, I tell people this too. I mean, I joined because I was going to get drafted anyways. I mean, I wasn't going to
sure,
college or anything else, and it was like, might as well just get it over with.
yeah,
And but the thing with the draft and everything else was, it got everybody out of your little cocoon of where you grew up with all the same people and everything else. And
mm-hmm.
all at once you were thrown into a barracks with 50 other people or whatever the hell it held in a barracks that you had to learn to get along with. People from
Yeah,
all over the country, they had talk different.
yeah, yeah,
There was black kids. There was no black kids when we grew up.
yeah, yeah,
In Minneapolis there was a few, but I mean, where we were at, there was none.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so our school was lily white, and that's just the way it was. And so you had to learn to get along with everybody,
sure,
and it was a good experience, really. I mean, as far as that went, I mean, there's a lot of negative stuff with the
oh yeah,
military, but with a,
that's pretty much a given, yeah,
right. But
yeah,
I mean, the big thing was it put you in a situation that you never experienced, and you had to learn to get along with people,
absolutely,
and so I think that was one of the more positive things about anybody going into the military.
yeah. Now, did you think, okay, I want to do army or just whatever? I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
well,
pick a branch and
I
go.
joined the Army because at the time, if you joined the Air Force and the Navy, you had to sign up for 4 years.
Ah, okay.
If you joined if you joined the Army or the Marines, if you what they did called sign up for the draft,
Mm-hmm.
you're only obligated for 2 years active duty. Well,
Okay.
and Army versus Marine, yeah, I'll take the Army any day.
Absolutely.
And so I went in the Army and didn't know anything about it, but my stepdad, he had been in the Army, and he was, gung ho for me to go in the Army versus anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I mean that's what I did, and it all worked out fine.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you get into the army. How long was basic training?
At that time, basic training was 8 weeks.
Okay.
Did it at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and you know, again, basic training is designed for everybody to get through. I mean, they make it
Yeah.
tough on you. I mean, running around, a lot of kids were really out of shape and whatnot. I wasn't too bad,
Yeah.
but it's designed to teach you how the military works. I mean, not only the marching around, obviously, but just the rank, just basically how it runs.
Mm-hmm.
And then most people go into after basic, they went to what they call AIT, Advanced Individual Training.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I first went in, you were at what they call a reception center before your basic training really started, and you took all these tests and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I took typing just because I wanted an
Yeah.
easy class.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could type pretty well, so I took the typing test, and they said, "Well," he says, "you can type better, faster than the kids we send through typing school, so you're probably going to be a clerk typist." Whatever. I didn't
Yeah.
care.
Hey, sounds good to me.
And I mean, I could type, with an old manual typewriter, 45 words a minute with
That's impressive.
one error or less, and so that kind of decided my fate. So I didn't even go to AIT. After basic training, they assigned me to a Nike Hercules
Mm-hmm.
battalion headquarters up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called a little town called Oakdale. We were out in the country,
Yeah.
but came in there as a clerk typist.
There you go.
But also one of the things we did with all the testing is if you scored really high in that, they asked, would you be interested to go to officer candidate school? Well, I didn't know anything about it other than what my stepdad had told me before I went in. He says, if they offer you to go to OCS, take it. And I said, well, whatever. And
Yeah.
so I went up there, and I probably would have had a good chance of staying there for the remainder of my 2 years
Yeah.
as this clerk up there. But in the middle of that summer of 1969, the Pentagon calls and says, do you still want to go to OCS? And I said, I don't know. I said, let
Yeah.
me talk to the battery commander. And they said, well, you got to call us back tomorrow. So I called talked to the battery commander. I said, hey, they called, they wanted me to go to OCS, and they said, you're going. I mean, you need
Yeah.
to do it. I mean, that's be a
Yeah.
good thing. So I did, went
Absolutely.
to officer candidate school, had to report there in the middle of September, I think the 14th September 1969,
Wow.
and 23 weeks. And, that was quite the adventure with OCS, because
Oh yeah.
OCS versus basic training, OCS was designed to make you quit
Ah.
instead of make you get through. So they did
Yeah.
everything possible to harass you
Sure.
and everything else. And, you really had to have some determination to get through it, because
Sure. And
our
how long was
class,
OCS?
23 weeks,
Jeez.
and our class started with 110 people,
Mm-hmm.
and out of that 110, there was like 42 graduated.
Wow.
Now, some of them, several of them, if you sprained an ankle or whatever,
Sure.
you got like what they call turn back, and then you would join an earlier class.
Yeah.
So 42, so there was probably 65 or 70 eventually made it. But and
Sure, but there were people
then
that
with
got rolled back
with
to
our
your
class we
class.
had 42. But then there was other rollbacks or whatever that
Sure.
came with us, and so I think we graduated like maybe double that. Probably 80 people graduated.
Oh,
But
okay.
of the ones that we started with of our class, I think there was 42 or 44
Wow.
or something like that.
That's pretty
But
impressive.
yeah, anyways, it was it was an adventure, and you're just early on. You're so confused.
Oh,
I mean,
that's the
they're just
idea.
everybody. It's just nonstop screaming at you, and you don't know what to do, and everything you did was wrong.
Yes.
And I mean, you learn right away. You didn't have walking privileges, so you had to run anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
When you ate, you had to ask permission to take every bite. And it could be no bigger, what they call a smack-sized bite, which is as big as your little fingernail. And then the other thing you learn, taking that small of a thing, it's like a pea,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have stabbing privileges, so you had to get your fork under it. And so it was
Oh my
quite the
god.
deal. And then they'd have you out running around all day long, and then you'd come back, and then the drill instructor had probably gone into the barracks, or what they call nuke the barracks.
Of
And they
course.
just took all your stuff, your foot lockers, your beds, everything, tipped everything upside down on the floor, mixed your clothes all up with everybody else's. It
Jeez.
just made it a mess. And then you'd get back after out there running around all day, and then they'd say, you got a half hour to clean this mess up
Oh
and
god.
fall out for whatever, and then it was just nonstop with stuff like that. But you just learned to deal with it, and then it got better and better, because the first 8 weeks you were what they call a beanhead. You were nothing. They said, as a beanhead, the first day they said, you were a day one, week one beanhead. He says, you are lower than whale shit at the bottom of the ocean. And that's exactly the way you felt.
Yeah.
And then after 8 weeks, you became a junior, I think they call
Yeah.
it. And you had little tabs you wore in your collar. So at first it just said OCS with
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And then when you were a junior, they had little white plastic things were behind it. So at least then you weren't hassled very much. It was
Right.
mainly to get by, because there was a lot of academics and stuff, and
Sure.
and most guys actually got turned back because of academic problems.
Interesting.
And then when you hit, it was like 16 or 18 weeks, then for the last 5 or 6 weeks you were a senior. Then
Mm-hmm.
you were a red tab, and then you could dish it out if you wanted to
Okay.
the lower class people. But
Yeah.
I was sick of it from getting on the receiving end early on, so I didn't go in
Fair
much
enough.
for that. But it just,
Yeah.
it was intense.
Tell
Let's put
me-
it that way.
Tell me about smoke, joke, and hang out.
Yeah. So then in the old barracks they had, these were old buildings, the old wood buildings, 2-story. They were built during World War II or shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
And of course in the bathroom, plumbing pipes and everything were overhead, just hanging there.
Yeah.
And that was part of the thing at first too. We didn't have hot water privileges.
Oh god.
So then, when you time to take a shower at night, they'd have some of these upperclassmen, these seniors, come in there and they'd march you in there. You have your soap in one end, towel in the other, bare ass naked, and march. And then they have to set it down. And then they'd march you in the shower, make you turn on the cold water, and then say, "Lather up! I want to see soap." Well, that was hard to do with cold water.
Yeah,
Whatever. And then out you'd come. But anyway, if you get in trouble with the drill instructors,
Yeah.
One of the things they did to a lot of people is they say, well, let's do some smoke, joke, and hang around. And so they, luckily, I never had to do it, but a lot of them did. You had to hang by the pipes, and then they'd put as many cigarettes as you could fit in your mouth and light them all up, and you hear the puff, and then they'd make you tell jokes. And so it was quite the.
So everyone had to do their Dennis Leary impression.
Yeah, I mean, like I say,
Vibes.
luckily I avoided that, but I mean, it was
Good Lord.
a lot of people met that fate.
Yeah.
And again, as you went anywhere and everything, anytime one of the drill instructors saw you, if you were out of going anywhere, as soon as they saw you, I mean, they'd see something, they
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah, yeah, of
And
course.
as soon as you dropped, I mean, you had to start cranking up push-ups.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just crazy. But anyway, you know, you got through it and
Yeah.
did what you had to. And
So you earned your butter bars at the end of 1969, or was it?
no,
not
it
till
was
the beginning of
March 6th of 1970.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you came a long way in just 1 year. So you're what, a 19-year-old second lieutenant?
Yeah, that
Jeez.
was one
They
of
don't
the
make
few.
those anymore.
No. Yeah, I was 19 for exactly 2 months,
Wow.
and after OCS, then I went up to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland for, I guess it was 2 months
Yeah.
until it was in May, and that was just what they call their. As an officer, you're assigned a branch, and when we were
Okay.
getting out, they came down from the Pentagon. They said, okay. We went to engineer OCS, but they said we really don't need engineers right now. There was a couple of guys that actually been to college and had engineering degrees. They made them engineers, but that was
Makes
like 4
sense.
or 5.
Yeah.
The rest of us, they said, okay, you get your choice between military intelligence, quartermaster, ordnance, and I don't know if there's anything else or not.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in there, the last name was Ware, I forget his first name. He was a E6. He'd been in the Army for like 15 years.
Oh
He
wow.
decided to go to OCS. And he talked to me and a couple other guys. He said, yeah, you should really go ordnance. And then if you get into ordnance, you can pick missile maintenance. And if you do that, that'll keep you out of Vietnam because there's no missiles in Vietnam.
Sounds
All
good.
right, that sounds all right. You know, so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then after Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which was just an orientation course into the
Yeah.
Ordnance Corps, then I went down to Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama for a
Oh wow.
6-month course down there on missile maintenance. And there was no hassle there. I mean, it was strictly all academic.
Yeah.
And it was, 5 days a week,
Yeah.
8
Not
till
too bad.
4 or 4, whatever the heck it was, or half hour for lunch, whatever it was. But it was all classroom, and again, it was a lot of academics, and there were several
Sure.
people didn't make it to there either. I mean, it was
Oh,
tough.
wow.
And so then when I getting, like about a month left there, well, then they came down to talk to us about where we were going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, this was in the late 60s, these Nike Hercules missile sites were still around.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was also some Hawk missile batteries.
Mm-hmm.
There was Nike bases, were still a bunch of those in the United States. There was just a few Hawk sites, and they were down in Florida, Homestead Air Force Base, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then they had Nike Hercs and Hawks in Germany, and then Korea, and whatnot. And so they came to me and they said, well, here's what we have open.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the openings was at Fort Baker, California, which I had no idea where it was at. and they said it was the headquarters of what they call 6th Region of RADCOM, 6th Region Air Defense Command.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, okay, that's fine.
Sure.
And so,
California, why not?
yeah, so my dad, he lived out there just south of San Francisco at the time. I called him that night. I said, yeah, I got my orders today. I'm going to Fort Baker. I don't even know where it's at. He said, well, it's right at the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge. And actually,
Wow.
we've been working over there the last week on a paving job. He was a paving contractor.
Yeah, yeah.
And did paving. And so I said, okay, well, whatever. So then I went there right before Thanksgiving in 1970, got out there, and then spent until March of 72. So 16 months, whatever else, spent there. And that was, like, say, the headquarters. There, at that time, there was Nike sites. There was like,
Mm-hmm.
I think there was 6 down in the LA area, 4 right in the Bay Area, 2 at Travis Air Force Base, and another 4 or 6 up in the Seattle area. And we were the headquarters for that. And I mean, it was all just, office work
Right.
and no big deal. But, that was fine. Well, anyway, then it would have been in February of 72, I got orders to go to Korea.
Okay.
And I was going to leave, like say the 20th or something like that of March,
Mm-hmm.
to go to Korea for a 13-month tour. And so then
were you
before
a first lieutenant at this point, or
after the first year I got in those days that's pretty much what you did.
yeah,
You were going to get promoted after 1 year to first lieutenant. So I mean I got promoted right in March of 71
okay,
to first lieutenant. So then when I got the orders to Korea, they had sent me a letter. I had like a sponsor of another lieutenant over in Korea,
okay,
and he said, "Well, you're going to be coming to I think there was like 6th Battalion, 71st Artillery. It was a Hawk unit up around the DMZ. And he
okay,
said, "You're going to be going up here." And I, okay, yeah, to Weijongbu. That's where it was. He said, "You're going to be coming to Weijongbu and whatever. We need you here." And so I was going to run what they call a direct support detachment, which
mm-hmm.
if out at the missile site, if they couldn't fix something, then we were the ones they called. And we had mechanics who were trained better than and had the equipment to fix stuff that they couldn't fix at the site.
Sure.
And I said, "Okay, well, that's fine." So it comes time to leave, and we go up to Travis Air Force Base, get on a plane, fly to Korea, get in there. You come into this Kimpo Air Force Base, and you're just kind of there. And they say, "Well, somebody will be by to pick you up tomorrow or whatever else." Okay, well, you don't know what's going on. You
Yeah.
don't know
Why
anything.
would you? You've never been there before.
Yeah, you're just kind of there.
Yeah.
Well, the next morning, these 2 CW4, Chief Warrant Officers, 4th grade. Now they have up to 5th grade, but then it was up to 4
Sure.
grades. And these 2 CW4s come, and they said, "Bryant," and yeah, okay, well, yeah, we're here to pick you up. And all right, fine.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we go out and we get in a Jeep, and we start heading south. And I said, "I thought Weijongbu was up north." "Well, yeah, we got to run down here for something else first." And okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Why
finally
would you think?
we pulled down, it was like a couple hour drive from Kimpo Air Force Base down to where I was, a place called Camp Humphreys. And we get into Humphreys and we kind of come to the battalion headquarters, and they take me in there and they tell the battalion commander, "Well, here he is. We got Bryant here." He said, "Okay, well then." And I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Well, you're going to be working here instead." I said, "All right, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
what do I care?"
Yeah.
And so
Makes no difference.
what had happened was the lieutenant that was running that, or I guess he was a captain. He had left or got relieved, like 2 or 3 months earlier, and so this one CW4, this Dave Goyer, he was the one that they made him run it. Well, he didn't want to be running anything.
Yeah.
He just wanted to do his
Warrant
job.
officers don't like work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why they were eager to find a lieutenant. And with the old sergeants network, I mean, these guys were old sergeants before they became warrant officers. They called some of their old buddies up there at the processing center in Kimpo, and they said, "Hey, be on the lookout for a lieutenant coming in. We need one." They, "Okay, fine." And so
Yes.
when I came in, they called them, and these guys got in the Jeep and headed up there the next morning.
to kidnap themselves,
Yeah.
someone to do all their paperwork.
Yeah, right. And so, there you go. I mean, I didn't, and so then I guess the people from the 6th of the 71st up at Weijongbu, I guess they came down later today to pick me up, and I wasn't there, and they said, "Well, where, and they're, where's Bryant?" They thought I went AWOL or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I never got there.
Yeah.
And they
Defected.
said, "Well, we show he got there, but we don't know, you really weren't checked out." And so, then I guess it got to the battalion commander up there, and that, hey, the 4th of the 44th down there in Camp Humphreys has Bryant. And then I guess they complained to the commanding general of this 38th Artillery Brigade.
Oh boy.
And they said, we want our guy. We were promised him, and he says, well, whatever, possession is 2/3 of the law. The 40 that has him, they can keep him.
9/10, 2/3,
Yeah,
whatever.
they can keep him. And so there I spent 13 months over there working,
Wow.
running this direct support detachment, and we had there's like 130 guys or something, and
Yeah.
they had different specialties. Some of them were missile techs or radar or computer or whatever else. And
Sure.
again, the Nike system, when it worked, would have been very effective. It would never fire in anger. But to bring a plane down, now it couldn't bring a missile down. But I mean, at that time, but again, it was just like the old TVs had vacuum tubes. Well, that stuff goes out all the time,
Sure.
and so these things were constantly breaking down, and that kept
Yeah.
our guys busy.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 13 months till the middle of April of '73, and then I came back and I was assigned to a little training unit down in Fort Bliss, Texas.
Oh,
Well, at the time, before I left Korea, because Vietnam was over then,
mm-hmm.
they were starting to have what they call a RIF, reduction in force.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the officers, if you got riffed, at the time a lieutenant was getting like $10,000.
God, what is
And
that
I
like?
thought, God, I can't
3.7
wait.
million in
Yeah, I
today's
can't
dollars.
wait till they riff me.
Yeah.
Then I'm out of here. So I thought, well, I'll just go to Fort Bliss and wait. I should be getting a notice pretty quick that I'm getting riffed, and then I'll take my 10 grand and run.
Sure.
What do you suppose? I don't get riffed.
Well, yeah.
And so then I knew that by June, I think it was, that I wasn't going to get riffed. And I said, well, I'm not sticking around. So then, as an officer, you don't have a set enlistment. You're just what they call voluntary indefinite.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you had to submit a request
Mm-hmm.
to the Pentagon saying, you want to be released from active duty.
Yeah.
And then it came back, they approved it, and so I ended up getting out in September of '73.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it was a good experience.
Yeah.
And again, I tell people, I got to do stuff at a young age, 21, 22-year-old lieutenant over in Korea. I mean, I was signed on the line for like over $50 million worth of equipment. And it was stuff like, I would have never had that much responsibility in civilian life at that age.
No.
And then being responsible for 130 guys working for you, and all their stuff coming up and what's going on. I mean, it was, like I say, it was a lot more than you're ever going to get in civilian life. And that's another good thing about the military.
Yeah.
It exposes you to a lot more at a younger age than you would have ever been anywhere else. And so I think it served me in good stead the rest of my life. It teaches you how to be organized and make use of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, I mean, did you have any thoughts or concerns, or were you just concerned about your own world of, is Vietnam right, or, looking back on it?
Yeah, I mean, I was like everybody else. I was a sucker, I guess. I thought, well, yeah, everybody's saying we got to be there. We got to keep the North from taking over, the domino theory of South Vietnam falls, everything else is going to fall, and da-da-da. And you just, at that time, the news media, you heard one thing, whatever the government wanted to come out, and so that's, most people just accepted it. And again, there was the anti-war protest at the time, but I mean, I was like most people, most people in the military just thought they were way off base and thought they were a bunch of doofuses, and we did our thing. But I mean, I knew in my heart, Vietnam, what the hell do I want to go there for? And that's why I was glad I went into the missile maintenance and didn't have to get exposed to all that stuff over there, because it was a mess, and you look back, what was gained by it? Nothing. And so I'm glad I made the choice I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Get to be an officer, and like you say, have responsibility, and life tools, go on from there. But I mean, more recent things as far as the military goes. I mean, are there things that you're seeing pop up now that are more screwed up then, or things that have gotten better? I mean, not that you have firsthand experience with anything more modern.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm involved with a local VFW chapter here. I'm the quartermaster of that, and again, but that's all, mainly a bunch of old guys like me, and have long since been out of active duty military, and
Yeah,
they hear things because a lot of them have kids that are in and whatnot, and
yeah,
just like you were in the Navy for 4 years, and
yeah. It's
so
just
you hear
a couple
things,
more
but I mean,
days.
it's like any government organization. I mean,
Yeah, just a giant
it's
clusterfuck.
too big, yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that works good, but there's just as much that is completely unorganized, just a mess.
Yeah, yeah,
And you know, and again, it's something like probably any big bureaucracy is the same way. I mean, it's hard to have everything just kind of humming along,
oh, sure.
and in a peacetime army, which we're really theoretically are now because we're out of Iraq and Afghanistan. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's been a mess for the last 20 years. I mean, all these guys
oh,
that
yeah,
served all these tours in Afghanistan or Iraq and all the suicides, and
oh, yeah,
I mean, it was just a terrible
yeah. Just a,
waste of good people. I mean,
yeah,
and with the military right now, of the total people on active duty, it's like I forget the exact numbers. I mean, it's less than a million, but it accounts for 0.4%
yeah,
of the total population of the country.
yeah,
And when you add the reserves and National Guard up, total numbers of everybody then that's in the military or on active duty or reserve, National Guard, it's 0.7% of the population.
yeah.
And
Very
how
few.
long can you keep going like that? Where again, if you have something that's
Yeah,
prolonged, Afghanistan, right, where you don't just burn these guys out, where they can't take it anymore.
yeah.
I mean, they've got to figure out a better way of doing things, and again, the draft will never fly because in this day and age, people
Yeah.
just don't want it. I mean,
Well, I
it's
mean,
always
even
for somebody
people.
else, but
Well, I
yeah,
mean, the stat that they always told me was anyone who walks through a recruiter's office, so not being drafted, they actually want to be there. 70% get turned away. They're too fat, or they got a criminal
right,
record, or
yeah, right,
tattoos, or
well, yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah, right,
So
and so
even if they
yeah,
had a draft, they don't. Where's their talent pool? There isn't one.
yeah. I mean, again, it's screwed up in a lot of ways, and again, there's a lot to be said for volunteer force because theoretically they want to be there, and they have stricter standards now than what they did back then. I mean, back then, there wasn't near the strict requirements like they have now. I mean, academic and I mean, the
Yeah.
middle of Vietnam, boy, they were pretty much taking any warm body that walked through the
Well, yeah, didn't.
door, and they figured, if they couldn't make it, well, then they would wash out in basic training or soon thereafter, and then they could get rid of them then. But
Yeah.
hopefully they made it, and there you go.
Well,
That
yeah,
was
because
it.
they had McNamara had something where it was like guys with like sub 80, like Forrest Gump's, literal Forrest Gump's,
Yeah.
like trying to, maybe we can educate them enough and remediate
Right.
them enough to
Yeah.
get them in there, and it just was a
Yeah, well, yeah, and
disaster.
with a lot of people, I mean, like say you get somebody in there and you train them, I mean, they're going to become a cook or a mechanic or something, and a lot of people could do jobs like that. If they
Yeah.
could do it, well, big deal. What was the problem?
Yeah,
I mean, they're never going to start, become a senior sergeant and have a lot of people that they're supervising, but I mean, just
Yeah.
if they can do the job,
yeah,
I don't see a problem. And they had the same thing when I was in 50 years ago. It's, this up or out, you had to make rank by a certain time,
right,
which
right.
I always thought was stupid because you had some people that were, maybe they could only make E4, E5, but they were damn good at what they did.
Yeah,
But then it's like, the old Peter principle, you're
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
promote them to their level of incompetence.
yeah,
And you get them to something that they totally can't handle. They can't supervise people, they can't do things, but they're a damn good mechanic or they're good infantry or good artillery or whatever it is.
right.
They're damn good at that, but they couldn't go any higher, and then they would start running these people out, and I think it's even worse now probably, and
Yeah.
I don't see the point in it. Like I say, if somebody can do their job
Yeah,
and all they're capable of is being an E4 or E5, well, so be it.
yeah.
Now,
yeah.
if they're at that level and they're screwing up, well, then get rid of them.
Yeah.
But if you can't, I mean, why run out good people? So I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know why.
they don't seem to be able to retain much in the way of people. I mean,
Yeah,
I've pretty much mentally checked out of the Navy. I mean, I'm still meeting requirements, everything else, but
yeah,
they're trying to retain me, and it's
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
out of here.
Right.
And just read that the Navy is going to pay people who enlist and leave for boot camp before June $25,000.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But they're not
Just to
going to
get 'em-
pay to retain
Yeah.
anyone,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
just
again,
it's all
yeah. I mean,
stupid.
who comes up with this stuff?
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking I'm gonna go AWOL and grow
Yeah.
a mustache and
Yeah.
try and get
Right.
that
Yeah.
25 grand.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. I mean, it's again, anything to do with the government is going to have their more than their share of problems and incompetence and goofy
Oh, for sure.
decisions.
Yeah.
Because again, the people at the top, like right now, the generals and admirals, it's been a long time since they were a lieutenant or a sergeant or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, they've become very political,
Yeah.
and these decisions all become political instead of what's good
Yeah.
for the military or anything else. And so that's a problem with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I certainly agree, and yeah, I for one can't wait to get out. But yeah, your stories when I was little, hearing about being kidnapped or whatever it was. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like every other YouTuber on the face of the planet, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. Like every other podcaster on planet Earth, I'm also going to ask you to write a review on your respective app platform and also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, encourage you to check out all of my socials, which are in the video description if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, you can find it at comicscard.com/Andrea-Bryant. Once again, that's comicscard.com/Andrea-Bryant. And if you're looking to order up some cookies, you can also check out cookiegirlbakery.com. That is cookiegirlbakery.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next week.